and thank you for coming here today. Since the devastating defeat and my re-election as leader of the National Party and Sussan Lee, the leader of the Liberal Party, we have set out on a journey of trying to reshape a coalition agreement. Now, I want to make it clear from the start and the outset, we've done that at the pace of Sussan Lee, taking into account and respecting the personal circumstances that she's found herself in. So much so that I made myself available to go to Albury when she wanted to initiate those discussions. Rather than making her come to Canberra, I took the decision to drive to Albury and to start those negotiations when she was ready. And then obviously after the sad passing of her mother, we made it very clear we didn't need to enter into any further discussions until she was ready. And that she was at a juncture where she had comfort. And my thoughts are still with Sussan and her family for the loss of Sussan's mother, and it's important that that was respected all the way through. This morning, after the discussions that both Sussan Lee and I have had over the ensuing period, our party room has got to a position where we will not be re-entering a coalition agreement with the Liberal Party after this election. What we have got to a position is that the National Party will sit alone on a principled basis, on the basis of looking forward, not having to look back and to try and actually regain important policy pieces that change the lives of the people we represent. It's on a principled position of making sure that those hard-fought wins are maintained and respected, and we continue to look forward. We look forward to what else we can do as a party and as part of an opposition now that can shape the lives of regional Australians for the better. And those positions that we couldn't get comfort around a nuclear being part of an energy grid into the future, about the Regional Australia Future Fund, a $20 billion fund paying a $1 billion dividend every year above and beyond to change the lives of regional Australians, about employing and training some doctors, to actually filling in some potholes, to actually giving young families the hope of childcare. What we fight for every day, that's the principal position we took that we needed to have comfort around. It's around divestiture powers for supermarkets. We've been very principled about that, about the impact it's had on farmers, but the impact it's also had on the Australian consumer, whether they be in metro or they be in rural areas. This wasn't adding any extra regulatory burden. This was simply saying there was a consequence and a deterrent if they did the wrong thing. This was simply saying the culture needed to change. And this is also about reform to the universal service obligation, to extend it to how technology has evolved, to cover those over 1,500 mobile phone towers that were built under the coalition, because these are tools of trade that people in regional Australians need every day. In fact, their lives are at risk because we don't have the regulatory guide rail around that. And what we are saying is that what we secured in the former coalition are policies that should remain. We don't want to have to look back and to waste energy on trying to re-prosecute the case. We should be continuing to look forward. And so I had a respectful conversation with Sussan Lee this morning and sat down, made it very clear that we remain committed to having the door open, respecting the position that Sussan's been put in, that she is a leader that needs to rebuild the Liberal Party. They are going on a journey of rediscovery, and this will provide them the opportunity to do that without the spectre of the National Party imposing their will, but setting clear boundaries and parameters about what's important to us, about what we achieved as a coalition in the last 3 years. Building on that, not having to look back and to fight for things, but to actually focus on what's important, changing the lives of people in regional Australia, young kids that are in regional Australia. And the reason I got into politics was seeing them for generations leave regional Australia to go over the Great Dividing Range and go to capital cities and never come back. I got into politics to bring them home, to keep them home. And I don't want to have to go back and fight to get what we need to make sure I give the opportunity to the people we represent. And I respect the principled position that Sussan is in, and she needs to go through a process, and I want to give her that time. And we made it very clear to one another that I believe she is the leader that can help the Liberal Party reinvent itself and get it to a juncture that the Australian people want to see, a healthy opposition. And I gave her that commitment that I'll work every day with her to try and rebuild that relationship to the point where we can re-enter a coalition before the next election. But at this juncture, we're making a principled position about not what we're prepared to give up on, but to build on what we've achieved and to move forward. So it's with great disappointment that I announced that we're not going to form part of that coalition. We'll be pragmatic and we'll work constructively with Sussan and her team to make sure that we bring down the Albanese government after the next election. Kevin, did you want to say a few words?
Yeah. Thank you, David. And look, just to reiterate a couple of things of what David just said, but also to give you sort of the energy and the way these conversations have happened. As David just articulated, this is for us a principled position. A lot of our members of our party room are going to lose position and titles out of this and money, and that wasn't even a focus of the discussion for us because of the principled decisions that we had to make about this decision. I just want to tell you too, I want to thank the party room, our party room. We've had two major discussions about this and conversations about this, done in a very considered way. No emotion in the sense of there was no gung-ho-ness about this, let's do this, let's do this. You know, why are we doing this? What are the principles we're talking about here? How does this work for the coalition going forward from today and into the future? So it was said like that. And I know too that the conversations, I've had insight into the conversations between David and Sussan, and obviously all our thoughts and prayers are with Sussan, also with the personal situation that she's dealing with this week. But those conversations happened in a very measured, respectful way, and I know that when David was speaking to Sussan this morning after the decision, that conversation was very measured and respectful. But also, we know going forward, I'm looking at this too, hopefully maybe we've all broken up in a relationship that's been important to us, and very often, more often than not, you get back together and you join back together with more clarity and more focus about what the relationship was about, what went wrong with it, about why you broke up, and when you get back together, how it's going to work even better. And that's how I'm viewing this. I think it's really important for the coalition that happened. We are always best as a country with a strong coalition. I hope, my wish in the future is that it's going to happen again, sooner rather than later, but we needed to make, for us, a principled stand on things today that we could not move on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we're very proud of who we represent, where we come from, and the variety of perspectives and our unique perspective that we bring to this Parliament House. We welcome you to our party room, the only party room that doesn't change, no matter who holds the government benches. This party room is always the National Party room. Our party room has made a decision, a very tough decision. It's not a decision they've taken lightly. We know the coalition has only been breached 3 other times in our history of our over a century as being representing the 9 million Australians that don't live in capital cities. But a reasonable request was put to a trusted partner, and it was refused. Policies that we had fought for, that only a few weeks ago we fought an election on. Policies that, in the main, rural and regional Australia backed. They are obviously divestiture powers. Why, in this day and age, we think antitrust laws are so onerous, it beggars belief. If supermarkets and big box retailers misuse their market power, just like in the UK and the USA, they should be subject to divestiture. Nuclear power. Why in this day and age, as an industrial economy, we should not avail ourselves of the backyard we have of uranium, just like the UK, just like the USA, just like France, to provide a reliable, sustainable, affordable, low-emission energy source into next century, way beyond 2050. And why we should walk away from a regional Australia Future Fund of $20 billion that was designed to assist the regions to overcome the challenges and seize the opportunities that the next 2.5 decades are going to be felt in our communities. And why, in the 21st century, we are happy to have an Australia Post Act, a Telecommunication Act that gives our citizens rights to a letter delivery and a landline. And why, in times of emergency and when having access to digital technology is how you run your business these days, why that's somehow standard in the suburbs, but not for those of us that live in the regions. This has been a difficult decision, as David said. We are committed to holding the Labor Party to account. The Prime Minister promised to govern for all Australians. Unfortunately, their first term left those of us in the regions wanting, and we will be relentless in pursuing Anthony Albanese and his ministers on how they focus on the people that we were sent here to represent. And so whether you did vote for a National Party candidate at the last election or not, our party room will stand up for your needs and your interests. Whether you live in Devonport, whether you live in Geraldton, whether you live in Toowoomba, or indeed whether you live in Lithgow, we stand for all of rural and regional Australia, and we won't take a backward step in that sovereign and sacred effort. Thank you.
I'll move around.
So, given that neither the Liberals or the Nationals can be in government just by themselves as purely because how the numbers are, now that you've exited the coalition agreement, have you just made both parties irrelevant and never forming government ever again?
No. This is a mature conversation that both Susan and I had around their need to rediscover who they are and what they want to be. We're very clear about who we are and why we're here. I get to leave a legacy for the people I represent, for those 30% of Australians who live outside a capital city. I don't intend to take a step back when I've taken some big steps forward in 3 years. I want to build on that, not have to expend energy in trying to rebuild it. I think we can and will work well together when the Liberals decide what they want to be. In much of the capital cities, they want to be able to prosecute their case in. My job is not to be a drag on their vote. And I've got to say, I never saw a billboard, I never saw a piece of material from the Labor Party attacking me or the National Party at the last election. The National Party didn't drag anyone's vote down in the capital city because we were able to focus on the things that are important to us. This is a principled position. We come here not wanting to have to scrap over every last crumb, but to make sure that we get what we deserve, what is fair. And this is on principle. It might.
Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. News just in, Nationals leader David Littleproud has announced that his party will split from its coalition partner, the Liberals, after failing to reach an agreement. And that news conference is continuing now. Let's go to David Littleproud.
And I got to say, when I had a meeting with Susan less than half an hour ago, the dignity that she showed in how she took this and how she sees a way forward was a reaffirmment that this is an opportunity to reset ourselves and to do that in an environment where we can. And I think that's important. There's no animosity, there's no angst, there's no hate. It's one predicated on respect and understanding. And I think that is the position that we'll go forward on.
Mr Littleproud, did you, in your discussions with Sussan Lee, push for more shadow cabinet positions for the Nationals, and was that rejected? No,
the numbers are the numbers. The primary discussion that Susan and I had from the outset was around policy. It was a principal position that we had was around policy, that we wanted to look forward, not have to look back, and to continue to fight for another 3 years on something I don't think a big ask in the scheme of things, but change the lives of millions of people who we represent. That's why I was sent here. That's the legacy I get to leave by standing in this room, by standing in front of you today. This is one of the hardest political decisions of my life. But you know what? I didn't make it by myself. I made it through the collective wisdom of everyone sitting in that room today, getting to it through their lived experience of who they represent and what they want to be able to leave for them and next generations. I think our democracy is healthier for it, that you've got 19 individuals that are prepared to do that, to come here and to get to the core purpose of why we're here, never to forget it.
Haven't you handed Anthony Albanese a massive win by splitting?
No, as I said, the commitment both Susan and I made is that we will work together to give her the space. But you've got to understand, Susan has been given an unenviable position to actually try and restore. I have faith in her. I actually think it is conceivable that she can win the next election. But there are so many forces within her party that she needs to have that environment to be able to create, to rectify it. and to set them on a pathway. And that is the commitment I gave to her. It is Sussan Ley is that I'm still there and the door is still open, but you need the time and space to know who you are and what you want to be, and know with clarity who we are, and that I give you that commitment. I don't intend to be a drag on the vote of the Liberal Party like I wasn't in this election. I intend to make sure that our party works constructively, but at this point and this juncture, for the betterment of a coalition going forward, it's time to have a break.
So if you're taking a break and you don't want to be a drag on your vote, will you rule out running against Liberal incumbents in the regions, because now every Liberal MP is a regional MP? Are you not now competitors in an election if you don't reach a deal on the other side?
Well, what we've been able to show even in the last election, I think there was only two three-cornered contests, and they were in New South Wales, West Australia and Victoria. So, in essence, we already have very strong relationships there.
There's a completely different situation now, Mr.
No, there's not.
There's no deal. There are many Liberal...
Well, you're coming from it from a Canberra bubble lens. I come from it from the lived experience of the culture of my great party and the great party of the Liberal Party.
So you won't
about how...
no. The next election?
Well, why would we? Sussan Ley will be the next Prime Minister. But what we will do is, obviously, as we've done before, respect the institutions that have been there before where there are sitting members. Why wouldn't we respect that? We're being pragmatic. This is a principled position, so it may be foreign to some of you. But we are making this on principles about how we actually deliver for the people we represent, and to allow the Liberal Party to be able to create that environment for them to get to that juncture for the people they want to represent.
If it's a principled decision, so you're not saying we're never getting back together.
No.
So there will be a bridge at some point.
We hope.
You've said divestiture, nuclear, and Regional Australia Future Fund are the three sticks.
In the USA,
Do the Liberals then have to agree to all three of those before you get back together?
Yeah, well, we made it very clear. This was the principled position that we got to. And I've got to say, Sussan...
Agree?
Those four, including the universal service obligation, these were positions that we made very clear to Sussan. And I think, and I'm not going to divulge our conversations, but I think she is to the juncture where she would like to get her party room, but to that point as well. But I've been allowed to get my party room to that principal position. She should be allowed to have that as well. Sussan Ley should be able to get her party room. They are positions the coalition have held previously. So there's not a foreign concept to think that we can't get there, because the coalition took that to the last election. And when we talk about drag on a vote, I don't necessarily think any of those were a drag on the vote from our perspective.
But so how long do you think that will take?
Well, that's a matter for the Liberal Party. I'm not going to intervene in their processes.
Months, years?
Well, that's a matter for them to work through. I don't think it'd be constructive for me to get in the middle of that and dictate terms. Sussan's got a big job ahead of her. She can do it, but I shouldn't be sitting there dictating terms to Sussan Ley. She can do that herself. She's a fully competent lady that will be able to achieve this if I give her the environment to do it. I have every confidence in that.
Was it unanimous? Did everyone in the party room agree, and did it go to a vote or something that showed that?
I'm not going to get in. Our party room doesn't divulge those things, but I can assure you that this is a decision of the collective.
And secondly, just in terms of what you decided, how is this not a massive dummy spit? Isn't the coalition agreement actually about how you divide up front bench positions and then your party rooms make decisions on policies and come together? What's happened to all of that process?
So let me reiterate. This wasn't about the spoils of defeat. This was about principle. A foreign concept some of you may not understand, but this was about principle.
The coalition agreement has always had embedded in it actual policy positions.
It has always had the number of positions as pure mathematics, and then there has been coalition agreements predicated in the past on policy positions. It depends on each leader and their priorities. So again, this wasn't about the number of positions we might receive. This was about the principles that we had garnered.
Mr. Littleproud, just on your legacy, talking like impact outside the Canberra bubble, the Labor government says that their first priority to get through the Senate into the big ledge is environmental law reform, or as you know better than me, big impacts on agriculture and mining potentially. Are you concerned that the Liberals could do a deal with the Labor government to get that through the Senate what would be your message to the industries and the workers that would be impacted by that? Have you signed yourself out of influence over that sort of legislation?
No, no one has. That's why you get elected to Parliament. You get to go and voice the opinion in that great chamber just behind me.
Yeah.
So we'll work through it. I haven't seen what the new legislation may be, so I'm not going to talk about hypotheticals.
You just won't have the numbers to block that sort of like you.
We don't have that. Well, I don't know if you've done the math, but we're a few short in there at the moment, mate. So I don't think we're going to block anything in there.
And in the Senate.
So in this election, your former deputy Karen Davey lost her Senate seat because of the joint ticket with the Liberals and only having 2 re-elected in New South Wales. Is that also something you're concerned about going forward?
Well, those are discussions that happen between our state bodies around Senate tickets, and I don't intend to get involved in that. That's something that the parties at a state level. Yep.
Just a 2-part question. Firstly, on nuclear, what was the position that you wanted the Liberals to adopt? Was it the one that was taken to the election, or was it simply lifting the moratorium or any reference to it? And secondly, the practicalities of this in Parliament. Obviously, the Nationals won't sit in shadow cabinet. We have discussions prior to votes with the Liberals, particularly in the Senate.
Yeah, so in terms of nuclear, we're pragmatic, as I've said, but we want to see that it is part of a technology agnostic approach to reducing our emissions and our energy grid. You cannot run an economy of the industrial scale the size of Australia on an all renewables approach. You simply can't do it. Just peek over to what's happening in Spain at the moment. What we're going to have is a reckoning where the lived experience of Australians, not only their electricity bills that were promised $275 this year in reduction in energy bills, have actually gone up by $1,300, and all estimations are they're going to continue to go up. There is going to have to be a recognisation that our energy grid is going to have to change and away from an all renewables approach. So we've made it very clear. I'm not necessarily saying that the Libs can't get to that point, but they need the environment to be able to do that. And in terms of the parliamentary arrangements, those are things we'll work through. I don't think those sort of minutiae are things that are going to tear us apart. We've made a position based on principle, Phil.
Mr Littleproud, yesterday Mr Hogan, when he flagged preparedness to walk away, said that if there was to be a rapprochement in the future, that the price of re-entry would be higher. So is it the case that if you were to get back with the Libs at any stage, that what you are negotiating now is just the starting point? And could you explain why wasn't Sussan Lee given the opportunity to convene her own party room meeting to put these proposals to her MPs, or did she just refuse to do that point blank?
No, well, the process that Sussan wants to go through is a more elongated one, and those are discussions we had, and I respect that. And I don't intend to try and dictate Liberal Party policy and procedure. I think that's unhealthy. And so I had to work within the parameters and the timeframes that I had to work with. And Sussan's desire to progress an agreement and obviously announce a shadow cabinet. So I had to respect that, and I still do. So I wasn't trying to force her into bringing that forward. So that's a matter for the Liberal Party, and if they get to a juncture where they go through their processes over the coming months, they're happy to do that. Your first question is... we're not going to stand still. We're going to continue to look at policies that make sure that are pragmatic, that are responsible, but we're going to continue to work closely with Sussan, and I gave her that commitment about an hour ago that we'd continue to meet regularly to make sure that both our energies are at some juncture about reforming this, if we can get to that juncture. And that's what both our commitments to one another was, that this isn't closing the door. This is about making sure that someone can walk through the door.
Mr Littleproud, so is it accurate to say you will go to the next election on your own as the National Party if the Liberals don't agree to your 4 sticking points?
If we can't get to an agreement, yes, that's the case. But our preference, in both Sussan Lee and my preference, is that they are given the space to create their policy platform, to be able to come back to us at any juncture. And Sussan's made it very clear to me, at any juncture we can go back to them, and we are going to continue to work together in keeping those lines of communication open. And my commitment to her, as hers was to mine, was that hopefully before the next election we can reaffirm a coalition agreement.
Yeah, look, a couple of questions, if I may, Mr Littleproud. There's 5.4 million people, Australians, who voted for the coalition at the last election, who are, hearing this news today and thinking, what the heck has just happened? How would you, in simple language, plain language, describe this for people? This breakup, is it friends without benefits? I mean, how does that look? And secondly, who will be your Treasury spokesman, your finance spokesman, your Foreign Affairs and Trade spokesperson?
We haven't worked through that. I mean, we've got to this on principle.
And you will have those positions?
Yeah, we'll obviously work through that. But what this is about principle and respecting theirs and respecting ours. That's why we've had a coalition for over 80 years. And I suspect we'll have one into the future. It has been broken before. And so what this is about taking a deep breath to be able to say to the Australian people that this is a time apart for us to be better, to focus on them. That we take away the bubble here of us asking for this trinket and that trinket, but saying we're focused on them. Now, we have a clear focus on the people we know we want to represent, and I want to allow Sussan the time for her leadership to shine, to be able to give her the opportunity to go and be able to demonstrate that, but to design that and be able to come back together. This is a healthy part of our democracy that I think we should be proud of. That we've got people that are going to come to this place and on principle make positions and stand by them, but be pragmatic enough to know that we are, at some point, we'll try and get back together and make sure we give a cogent argument to the Australian people about an alternative to Anthony Albanese. And that'll be done in a respectful way of cooperation in making sure that people of Australia understand Anthony Albanese is the enemy.
And just to clarify something that Mike's written about, Phil and others, will the Nats, will you have parties? Do you still have party status? Will your positions, when you fill those positions, will the office holders be paid at the commensurate rates?
Well, that's a convention of Parliament. We'd have to talk to obviously the Parliament and the Prime Minister about what that means. But we do have party status, where there's 20 of us, 19 after July. But effectively, we are a party, and we do have party status.
Just to get a sense of history, it was the 1980s when there was last a breakup, wasn't there? Could you relate that experience to now?
No, it's a little bit different. There was a Queenslander involved last time as well. Please don't take that as anything other than... There is no Littleproud for PM push. That was a Joe for PM push. And in fact, from my understanding, that was a parting of about 4 months. But look, we're not going to put timelines or rush this. This is about a proper process of democracy and democracy working better. We shouldn't tear this down. This is a healthy thing for us. This is a healthy thing for the Australian people to know that we are principled in our positions and we're going to get those positions right before we come back to you in 3 years' time.
Mr Littleproud, you talk about this being a break. Do you acknowledge there's a possibility that you won't get back together?
Well, everything's possible, but when you've got commitment and you've got leadership from both Sussan and I that have committed to one another about how we can move forward and how we can get to a position where we come back together, that commitment, I think, is the foundation stone for us to rebuild from. And I think this will give the air and the space the Liberals need. And we hope they do, because if they don't have that, if they don't identify who they are, then none of us win. And so this is a great thing for our democracy that we can do this. This isn't anything personal. This is principled.
Sorry.
Ladies first.
No, sorry. Just on the universal service obligation, so can we expect the Nationals to vote with the Labor government on that?
Well, they're talking not about the infrastructure that's already there. They're talking about Elon Musk's infrastructure. I don't think they've thought what that means, because they don't own that infrastructure. Elon does. And if they want to impose conditions on him, Elon might just point his satellite somewhere else. This is about the mobile phone towers that you, the Australian taxpayers, built over 1,500 of them, hundreds of millions of dollars, that aren't being maintained. That people in my electorate are in dangerous situations and cannot rely on the use of a mobile phone tower. Now, that doesn't happen in a capital city. It happens in peri-urban areas. But why is an Australian living in Maranoa disadvantaged to their lives are being put at risk? I think it's a pretty simple principle. Now, I'm happy to sit down with the government about extending what they're talking about, but the universal service obligation as it stands at the moment covers landlines and payphones. Landlines are going out. Payphones started about 64,000 of them. They're down to about 14,000 now. There's $270 million a year paid to Telstra to maintain all this. They're maintaining what? The technology's moved past us. We've got these things called mobile phones, mobile phone towers. Why wouldn't we protect Australians? Why wouldn't we protect people I represent so that they know they can ring 000, that they're not sitting on the side of the road, busted up? That's what I came here to do. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning, that they don't have that equality of sitting underneath a mobile phone tower because Telstra couldn't be bothered to maintain it. That's not fair. That's not the Australian way, and that's not the Australia I intend to leave behind. Hold on, okay.
I know that you've just said before that Albanese is still the enemy. The job is to point that out. But do you think that by breaking from the coalition agreement, this opens up a channel of negotiation more directly with the government? Has that ever held you back before?
No, well, we're going to be pragmatic, but our enemy is the Labor Party. Now, philosophically, we are a long way away from them. So I can't see too many situations that they bring forward policy that we're going to be jumping into bed with. The reality is that we intend to work very closely with our Liberal friends, and this is about making sure we create that environment for both of us to be better. Both of us to be better to the Australian people and to make sure that we continue to focus on the outcomes Australians expect us to.
Mr Littleproud, John Howard has said that the rules of politics are governed by the iron laws of arithmetic. So do you acknowledge that the Liberals and the Nationals cannot form government without each other? And just on your nuclear policy, there's been a lot of speculation. Is it still your policy to build 7 reactors around the country, or is it your policy to simply remove the ban on nuclear and let the market?
We've been very clear, we've been pragmatic about that. I think, as I've said, Anthony Albanese was masterful in perpetrating a lie about a $600 billion scare campaign when independent research made it very clear from Frontier Economics, who both us and Labor use, said that our total grid, not just nuclear, but our total grid was just over $330 billion, $263 billion cheaper than the all renewables approach that he's talking about. The nuclear part was about $120 billion of that. Effectively, he perpetrated a lie. But we're going to be pragmatic. We think we should have a technology agnostic approach to that. In terms of John Howard's assessment, yes, politics is the brutal game of arithmetic, but the way that you get numbers is to stand for something. And that's what the National Party is doing today. We're standing for those people that we represent to make sure that we don't look back. We continue to build on what we've been able to earn and to make sure we make their lives even better.
And so Dan and Jane have both asked you for your policies to lift the moratorium.
And I've said we've been pragmatic.
I'm still not clear which it is.
Well, nuclear must be part of the mix. What we're saying is, we've always said we should have a technology agnostic approach. Now, whether that's owned by the Australian people or whether that is actually taking the moratorium away, what we want to see is a mix in our grid. Because you know what? We all want to reduce emissions. But to those people that are living in capital cities today, I just ask you to understand the burden you're asking us to bear. I ask you to get in the car, come out and see what we're enduring out there. They have lost their social licence, renewables. They are tearing up our landscape. They are tearing up your food security. And they are tearing families apart because some get the turbines, the others get the transmission lines. And I've seen families torn apart from it. Now, I get you might be able to put your head on a pillow at night, but we live with the consequence of that. We're not against your philosophy. We respect it. But respect what you're asking us to bear. And I just think there hasn't been the leadership. And the first thing I did when I became leader was write to Anthony Albanese and ask for a national energy summit to be able to bring energy experts, with nuclear as well, to the table. So there wasn't us sitting around here with ideology thrown through small groups, but the Australian people could understand exactly what the opportunity was. We have sovereignty of all our resources. We should draw on them to make sure the burden that you are asking on regional Australia is shared and can be done equitably, but can be done in a better way that creates jobs, not just a few that polish a few solar panels.
Just on tangible policy, farm policy, do you have a warning for the Liberals? They have very few urban seats, and they toyed with the idea of supporting a ban on live sheep exports, even live cattle exports. I'm not being silly, but would you ever support a coalition that supported the Labor Party's ban on live animal exports? Could you ever get back together if the Libs voted to support or philosophically supported a ban on live sheep exports?
No. And I made that very clear in the last Parliament.
Hard no.
I made that very clear that we would not be part of any coalition that banned the live export of animals out of this country. That is a hard line we would not cross. Thank you. Just last one. Yep.
Considering the Australian people voted against nuclear at the last election, are you fighting a losing battle? Why do you keep trying to push for it if the Australian people don't want it?
Well, I think that's a brave assessment to say they voted against nuclear energy. I think they got a very good scare campaign, about a $600 billion scare campaign. I don't think that was the reason. I think, if we're honest, it was more about a scare campaign on nuclear, on Medi scare. And I think it's also, we've got to be honest, it was about work from home. I think we saw that in regional electorates as well, where we copped a lot of the pain because of that. We've got to be honest. You can't put your head in the sand and say it was a great campaign, because it wasn't. The numbers don't show that. But you've got to have the courage to look people in the eye and say, we got that wrong and we shouldn't do that again. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.